everyone joining the Worth Making podcast session together. Um, this is a space I kind of want to go a little bit back in time that Karuna, Michelle, and myself had been spending a lot of time talking about career-wise, creativity, design-wise, like what sacrifices that we were making to ensure that we had a creative life. And then Michelle was like, what the fuck? We should totally do a podcast and use it as a hive to build out our networks, introduce people to other people that we love so much. So we're on episode 3. If you haven't listened, episode 1 is the three of us just dumping a bunch of shit about ourselves.
I mean,
Episode
I would say
2,
amazing shit, Allison.
like good shit,
Yeah.
honestly.
The shit you want to know. The
Yeah,
secret shit.
and just the process of our careers and how we navigated through it. And then we decided we should do this and introduce amazing people to each other. I think we were all craving community so hard. So having this as a platform, I mean, you're listening in, that's great, but I really feel like it's basically us introducing amazing people who shaped who we are um, to each other. And you
Yeah.
get to come in and listen to it. So, episode 2, I was very grateful and honored that I was able to bring in Raphael Bembarad, who was, who is the founder of a social impact branding studio who really shaped me. And I feel like during our conversation, he gave us pretty much a philosophy degree, um,
Mhm.
and would encourage everyone, if you haven't listened to it, go back and do it. But I am so excited that for this episode, Karuna was like, I know exactly who I need to bring in, and that is Mary Ping, who is so sweet and so brilliant. And I can't wait to nerd out with you. And that's the purpose of this. So, with that, I will hand it off to you, Karuna.
All right, great. Well, I could not be more pleased to introduce Mary Ping. Hi, Mary. She is one of the most unique and successful creatives I know who has really defined her world in her own terms. Her fashion brand, Slow and Steady Wins the Race, has been surviving and thriving in a radically changing landscape in fashion for over 20 years. She's a trustee for the Noguchi Museum here in New York. She has had her work featured everywhere from the Victoria and Albert Museum to the Venice Biennale. She is a creative director, a board member, a bicoastal designer, a cultural anthropologist, a writer, a caregiver, and a theater geek. The inimitable Mary Ping. And we're going to start out with like our core question, which is, what are you working on and what is worth making to you right now?
Thank you for having me, Karuna. I hope my audio is still okay because I have a very bare bones setup.
Good.
Um,
All good.
um, and thank you, Michelle and Allison. Um, so I mean, it's a big laundry list now. I think it's probably um, I mean, I think maybe for clarity, I can do a quick rundown. And this is not in any order. Um, I still have my design studio, Slow and Steady Wins the Race. I would say nested under that are various continuing projects and collaborations. We have Los Angeles Book Fair coming up. Um, I have a couple of other things that I'm very much scrambling to make sure I have the time that it deserves creatively under my studio. Um, and like Karuna said, I have been consulting, and I will say those always came very organically because I feel that people, mostly like friends will reach out and we'll just have a very organic discussion and and I come up with solutions, and then I think it just turned into like, wait, can you can you do this for us for like on a official basis? Um, so and then um and then similarly, I would say that the separate uniform business that I am now doing in Los Angeles uh, came again organically through friends pivoting to the hospitality industry, realizing that they wanted a certain vision for their restaurants. And then I became this default, like, well, you're the only friend I know who's a designer, who's a designer, and I trust. So I feel so I think that was the genesis for some of that. And I will say um that with the uniform business, it really happened with an old friend saying, "Oh wow, like you're already doing some of this. Do you want to do it together?"
Mm.
And again, it was a sort of I through many years of obviously where you just kind of um learn how to put certain guardrails in place. I did take a moment to think, like, do I really want to start another LLC? Um, and I would say like some of these internal questions do kind of go back to, they link back to your question of, you know, what is worth making. And I have to say that the decision making for various projects, that is a question that's on that list. And I'm sure it happens for a lot of people in the creative industry. So I use that as a criteria.
Mhm.
And um, I mean, I say this to my therapist every once a week, and it's a recurring theme where and I have to be more discerning. And she's like, you're discerning for various things, but you never want to let anyone down.
Right.
And you want to, so we need to get to the core of
Mm.
that,
Mhm.
where you feel that you have this sense of almost like service to um, agreeing to every project,
Mhm.
So, and I think I'm very slowly um, navigating the best practices for myself in that. Um, so I would say there was a period in my life career-wise where yes, I did say everything. Like I said yes to everything. Um, and I knew even the projects that I felt very, very unsure about with red flags, I knew. Um, and I use that as like a cautionary tale for myself. And then like rarely I would have dodged a bullet, mainly because um I would hem and haw, like I just knew something didn't feel right about the project. And I'm grateful that some external force sort of stepped in and was like, you're not doing this.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
But even
Interesting.
then, I would say like, oh, I really feel bad saying to that person like, oh, I'm sorry. I think I'm not the right person for that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting that so all of this is coming directly through relationships. You're not like going out and like looking for work. And because it's a relationship, you feel that sense of like, okay, you want to support the relationship and therefore do the thing.
Very
But
personal.
how much of your choice at this point is like your financial self, your creative self? How often do you find that those things like come together versus you're making choices between them?
oh, I think I would say the encouraging part is that they do come to the forefront more because you just kind of let go of, um, yeah, I like to think there's some sort of like energetic magnetism at
Mm,
play because, um,
absolutely.
yes, because that's just sort of that I think that has something to do with like word of mouth too.
Mm.
You start um I'm also trying to avoid saying all the time. So
So now
you
we're all keyed into it as
yeah,
well.
um it happens. I think you do run into a period where you realize the forefront become these better opportunities, or like the opportunities that you want. I don't want to say better, the opportunities that feel aligned, and and I think that's really from knowing more of exactly what you want, maybe
Yeah.
Hmm.
having a very clear picture of what feels in line with values.
Yeah.
Um, even if it could be a challenging or smaller project, I
Hmm.
just I can spot it. It's the same way that maybe you're gonna like today like, oh, I really feel like I want to order my favorite meal, and you go to the the spot and you know exactly what you're going to get. So it's that sort of
Hmm.
feeling,
Yeah.
intuition, I would say, that
Yes.
that that's going to guide you to saying yes to that project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that probably got
Can
cultivated with all of the things you said yes to, and then like going through the reality of each one of them allows you to kind of hone that intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Allison, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, can I pull us back in time, Mary, if you're cool with that? Because I feel like from not a product space, a branding space,
Hmm.
I had worked at several places, and before going independent, I had so many relationships with brands and with people. And when I went out on my own, they all gravitated and followed me. They were like, holy shit, we can pay half the price and get the same level of work. And I'm just so curious how, again, personally, people find me because of my reputation.
Hmm.
And I want to know how they find you.
I would say similarly, I would say less from the industry, which is the funny thing.
Yeah.
Although I will, well, it's that part is a very,
Product is so different from brand. So, yes.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a very, I would say that lives in a very nebulous amoeba-like, for me, for my like career
Mhm.
trajectory.
Yeah, because you're sitting right. I wanted to bring this up to frame this where you're going to go. Is you're sitting at a very interesting nexus between art and fashion design.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and so many of us here, like Allison's worked on the branding side and the product side. Karuna has worked on the product side. I've worked on the product side. You do that with your brand, Slow and Steady Wins the Race. And your other line, Mary Ping, as well. I mean, that's the commercial side, but you do a lot of exhibitions and artist talks and things about fashion. And that's a more intellectual side. That's a very different side of the theory of fashion, or the why you're creating what you create. So you exist in a very different space.
Hmm.
And so it sounds like from Allison's question too, that you're finding people from other spaces because you sit
Hmm.
across worlds. Does that sound true?
Oh, yes. And I think it's throughout the sort of my own history, like what Allison was saying, like maybe pulling back. I still maintain a lot of contacts from undergrad. And I mean, even I would say even when had my first runway show, it was a mix of college friends helping out, high school friends helping out, and everyone has branched off to their own professions. And I would say I'm very lucky and grateful that I keep in touch with everyone. And I'm friends with them I realize for a reason. It's
Mhm.
not just, you kind of get along on like a social level, but everyone is so like, the work ethic that I would agree with, and maybe more so because like they're your friend and they want to, help you out and be a part of like the project and not let you down. And so yeah, so I would say that that kind of word of mouth happens. Um I was in one sort of like circle, and then maybe the Venn diagrams part is really because I think from being a company owner, like having a design studio, there are the different disciplines. So for Sloan Steady Wins the Race, there were different s- like there's a design philosophy that set in place, and therefore every element that is related to sort of like brand identity, let's say. Um, I mean, I worked on that. Nothing was outsourced. So the only outsourcing in the studio is really just working with manufacturing factories and, finding, the materials. But our voice, our image, even the experience of all of that. The only time I would say, because I already established the code, the visual code, was to kind of give it to a graphic design friend, again, a friend, to translate the assets, and that was obviously, I think, good because then I'm not in tunnel vision. It's gives a fresh point of
Yeah,
view.
yeah.
Um,
Did you like what they made, or did you make them change everything once you
no,
got
no, no, they were great. I mean, that's the other thing. I feel like um I'm pretty good at pinpointing who's going to be the right fit for something.
yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know what that, maybe it's like I'm like maybe I have a skill set of like a Hollywood agent or something, but like I think a lot about that, like who would be the right fit for the X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
Especially like I would say in the case of like even with the uniform business, there are way different parameters and uh restrictions, limitations built in. So I can sit down and understand like putting together the best team for it.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
which factory would I go to for
Yeah,
this?
I think that, yeah.
And um
That comes from that your relationship with our friends, that empathetic, like wanting to be there for people, and people want to be there for you. And that's already built in naturally, I think, to who you are, which is what a lot of great artists and designers have, is that the ability to tap into other people's shoes and feelings.
mhm.
So you build teams
So
from there.
So now I really want to know, like, what do you say no to? Because you're also like the more you do, the more people know you, the more asks there probably are. Like, what are you comfortable saying no to? And like, what was your journey to that?
I would say I like new challenges, but they really have to feel there's some sort of um sophisticated aesthetic level happening. That is and I want to like redefine that because I don't want to say like, oh, I only say yes to something in like the luxury sphere because it starts to sound like that. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
I think um maybe it's more just like working with it's two criterias. It's definitely working alongside a project or let's say some sort of collaboration where excellence is expected
Mm. I love that.
and everyone is working at their top game.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I want to say, for a good example, is when I was invited to be on the board of the Noguchi Museum, I felt like, oh, I'm in the presence of everyone who, there's like mediocrity is not allowed.
Right.
And everyone is there because they're highly accomplished um in their lives. And then
Yeah.
I would say for different, but again, I can find the excellence in smaller projects too, and it's not, I would say like I I hold strongly. I'm very, I'm the conviction of wanting to do a project where maybe there's no, there's a tiny budget, but you know that the outcome is everyone's giving it their all. Maybe it's transformative. Maybe you come out with something that's you know, v- that changes the conversation and somehow it's very yeah, it moves the needle a little bit somehow.
Mhm.
I guess that's the equivalent of like, you always read these stories of the independent film with like
Mhm.
zero budget and it just
Yeah.
kind of really takes everyone like it tugs everyone's heartstrings and whatnot versus like the um blockbuster. Um,
Yeah.
Oh
So,
my gosh,
yeah.
Mary, I feel like so you absolutely have built a reputation of excellence. I can speak for myself. When I get pulled in, they're like, we just need something psycho, crazy, weird.
That's your reputation.
And I want to know, how did you build this reputation and foundation of excellence?
gosh, it's so I care a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
will say that's the definitive term. It's hard to quantify. I'll give a very hopefully like a very quick 2-minute example. Rory
We're
Sutherland.
here for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was recently reminded of Rory Sutherland, who might still be at Ogilvy. Um, and he talked about the doorman fallacy which is the sort of like creation of sliding doors, automatic doors, because of, thinking that you're going to automate and ex just cutting costs. Okay, so this is the example was like, this is where cutting costs is problematic, or like giving something over to AI is problematic.
Mhm.
So it's called the doorman fallacy, and that is when buildings started to replace doormen with a sliding door. And then they realized that they were losing value because they took for granted that the traditional doorman who is trained remembers everyone's faces. They provide a sense of security, like it's the human
Right.
value generated
Yeah.
was in, you know, later on when you see the how detrimental it was in the long run. And so I think about, having that as a reminder when we approach projects. I'm totally the nerd. I'm totally the nerd at the even when I have to bring to the table, let's say, um, the various phases of a sample development, and if it's really not, and if there's some sort of error, I feel like, everyone's like, well, let's just review it anyways. But I know the pet peeve in me really is like, oh, the tone is off, like the thread
Mm.
tone is off. Oh, they like didn't do it as well. And then I understand there's like room for improvement in the final stage, but I I think I just don't like when I lose that discipline somehow.
Hmm.
And I always say I've been saying this a lot recently, which is credit has to go down the ladder and blame
Yeah.
goes up the ladder. And so I always
Hmm.
definitely,
Hmm.
I'm the company owner. Um, and I know the certain attitude where is there's has become a little softer, where it's like it's not so much like, oh, don't be so hard on yourself, but it's more this acceptance of even, like if I were in the other person's shoes and this is like a client that I'm delivering to, I would never, um, make something in the early stages where it looks kind of just, you dialed it in and, or like you were careless, basically.
Mm, mm,
So
hmm.
when I run certain projects and when I come in on certain projects, and as a consultant, and I do see departments sort of for whatever reason, and it's dialing it in. Um, and I'm not saying that they have to be very transparent with certain excuses, but I will say that I've also had like the f fortune of having some great assistants in the studios who are, who would work like nonstop. And then I only find out 5 months later that they were flying in the weekend to see their dad because they had a brain tumor but
Oh
with no
God.
complaints, no complaints and get the job done. And I know that's hardcore, but you look at different industries and you think like, right, if I was a brain surgeon, I would I'm not gonna be like, well, I'll get it right on the second time.
Right, right. So, okay, so this brings up a really important question, which is what kind of compromise is acceptable to you and what kind of compromise is unacceptable to you?
Good one.
How do you distinguish? Because we all have to make compromises
Right, right.
personally, professionally, but like there's got to be a type that you're okay with and a type that you're not okay with, clearly, from what you're telling us.
Oh, okay. So let me see. I would say I'd have to look at the situation in the long view first. Um, where it is like, okay, like do we have the horizon where it is like, well, let's take the extra 5 minutes and get it done correctly. Um, and just again, like move some chess pieces around. I would say like I'm very open-minded about like, oh, there's always a solution. We've made great strides. We can't like I can't be talking to like, I don't know, like the most menial level in my industry and have someone say like, "Oh, I just can't do that." I'm like, "What are you like? What?" Um, and 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 I think that's when I like just certain things and it's just like I've learned better to cut my losses early, and I think that that I so for like non-compromising, I think if it's going to affect the outcome where you get like let's say a lower grade of quality, I cannot compromise on that. I'll go in and roll up my sleeves and do it myself if I have to, but I'd like to avoid that. Because I do think that that also in itself is
Problematic.
something, yes, you have to reflect why you're being put in that situation
Yeah, that
constantly.
that that also talks to the end result.
Yeah.
At least that's where my head goes to is what's the excuse me, the final result you're going to end up with,
Mm-hmm.
and can we live with it? But also it can speak to the process and how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
I think for some of us, we deal on really, really, really tight timelines and heavy business schedules. And that
Mm-hmm.
may not be the case in your situation or with your brand when you get to run the things there. So, yeah, in terms of the compromises that you're willing to make in the process of making something, the quality and the level that you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. I've had experiences in the past, and this is something I do want to. I'm still working on my own mitigation, which is I to get it to the point of excellence. It does become this let's say it's a financial compromise. I
Mm.
will say like obviously in this industry they always like to say that rule like you have to choose two, you don't get all three, which
Right.
is you know is it cheap, is it fast, is it on time, that
Yeah.
sort of so, yes, I have made compromises where you find the solution and you say, like, okay, well, if it means like it has to get done in the best way possible, of course, we're going to have to um, pay X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
And, or it's the time, it's sort of the sacrifice of putting something on pause and then jumping in.
Yeah.
And, I will say that certain things also another thing I won't compromise on is if there is a sense of urgency. If you're almost at the finish line and like if you're almost at the finish line and you cannot peter out. You can't like all of a
Right.
sudden
Right.
pass the hot potato to someone else, because and that's where it would become like a hard decision to make where um which one do you choose, and and inevitably like maybe you just have to find the one other thing that's maybe a conflict and put that on hit pause for
Mhm.
that.
Can I will jump in, Mary. What makes you force something over the finish line?
Oh wait, can you say that again? It like cut out a little bit.
Oh,
I just heard
um,
finish line.
I'm so sorry. When you are deep in a project, what makes you fucking push through to the finish line? Whether or not people have buy-in or the budget is there, like what is it that makes you say this needs to be out in the world?
Um,
TED Talk. TED
yeah.
Talk right
And
here. Sorry.
when do you know to do that? When do you know that you're in that
Like
space, right? That time period.
I just
Oh,
feel like fighting for something to get out there. I want to hear that.
Oh, I would say, well, I think more specifically in the situations that I'm in, the work situations I'm in, a lot of those have already been set up with a full team,
Mm.
and it's more like, let's not, like, this is the final run. Let's not let anyone down. We're all here.
Yeah.
I would say that knowing that I have a room full of people and it's like, you know, that's it. Fitting is on this day, photo shoot is this day,
Right.
get the assets done. Um, as
It's
best
built
you,
into the process.
yes.
It's built in,
Yeah,
and that's a
but
success.
you are talking about something that is like a major conversation right now around like a generational conflict
Mm,
around
Mm.
this concept of work-life balance.
hmm
I want to take this opportunity to maybe introduce the idea that the way it's been framed is wrong.
mm,
Because
Mm.
there's a whole like Gen X versus Gen Z, like Gen X is like the way we worked, these kids these days, what do they think? They just go home at 5, and like you have all these managers who are frustrated, and then people who are 25 who are like, you want what from me and you're paying me what, right?
hmm
And like, yes, I'm concerned about my mental health, and yes, I'm conscious of that when, maybe 30 years before it wasn't a conversation, right? So there's complexity in there. And one of the things that I've found is that you almost take the conflict off the table when people are passionate, when you're
hmm
providing them with inspiration. And part of what is
Mm.
coming up in what you're talking about is that like you have a level of excellence you're achieving.
hmm
Like, do you think that part of getting them on board and them staying late and getting it done is about the infectiousness of like your passion and that expectation, and that maybe people rise to it? Like, how do you think about that in relation to like everybody wanting to just work less and less and less?
Oh, yes. I do. Yes, I know that that's a very open conversation that's like active and we talk about generational change and I always pause for a second because I think I rethink that scenario because that's the same thing my dad would always say to me and my sister, and I think he probably had a similar from older generations, something sort of like um reprimanded in his generation too. I I mean, I remember in college being on the phone with him and saying like, "Okay, well, I gotta go now, Dad. I'm gonna go watch a movie with my friends." And and I will point out we were going to like the Tuesday special, which was like $4. And so because so I was saving money and I got a 5-minute lecture. Well, more like a complaint. Oh, well, that's very nice that you get to go watch a movie with your friends because when I was your age.
Yeah, I think that's a generational thing that keeps on happening. But I think also to this point of that balance between like when you're when you're doing something that's infectious and you're taking care of your people, and it's a give and take. It's that feeling of wow, when things are going on, we all pull together and we get
hmm
this over the finish line. And then when things are settled in, or when you need to take time off to go be with that family or do that thing that you need to go do and have an appointment, you have that support to go do that.
hmm
So that give and take, I think where people are burning out these days is that feeling that they can't go do those personal things, that it's such a hardship to be able to take care of themselves,
hmm
because they just have to be a body showing up and being seen at work and being productive,
hmm
versus we're a team together and we're pushing this thing forward together and we all have ownership in it,
hmm
right?
But do you have people who are like, no, it's 5, I'm leaving? Like, how do you manage both?
I think throughout the history of my studio, I've definitely I would I'm gonna approach this as like a very nerdy um in a nerdy way because it's like almost like statistics. It's like my sampling pool is like so large. And again, sometimes it falls into me saying well, this person is here and they've committed to being an assistant and or like a summer intern, let's say, paid summer intern from different schools and may they're here for a learning experience. And I would say like over the course of many years, you do meet a lot of v- different personality types who are design students and sometimes I just have like students who come from other fields who are just aligned with the value of the studio. They could be like a biology major. We had a biology major one time that just had a keen interest in design.
Nice.
And it goes back to like being passionate. And I would say that I've I love some of like my best assistants. I would say they would be successful at anything and they have become that. I can't, lure them back in. Um and and I would say, diplomatically, like certain people just weren't the right fit and maybe they've gone on to do other things.
Mhm.
Um and I think everyone's different. That's the very challenging part. I have a lot of insight now with consulting for companies outside of the US. That's a whole other factor to take into consideration, the
Mm,
sort of cultural differences.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know,
Italy and Korea are like a
Totally.
different conversation.
I mean,
Totally.
I would say even students, I've had students who've like come in from Denmark and Switzerland, and maybe it's that culture. They, the work ethic is amazing. The approach is very formal and refined, and they want to do it correctly every step of the way. They are on time. They've also self-initiated. They've like prepared in advance how to navigate living in Manhattan with and not ever being in New York City,
Wow, yeah.
and being like a 19-year-old that way. I feel like, oh, maybe I should send my kids to that school, like
Yeah, 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 totally. Well,
I
Mary,
don't know. I kind of feel like, Mary, I don't know if you would agree, but again, all of us here have started our own businesses and we've worked for other people before, but I know for myself, um, working for my business, I work like way too many hours because I want that level of excellence. Its reputation is associated along with it. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that. The difference between having your own brand or business versus working for someone else. And let's put it in the context of young people
Mm,
yeah,
like graduating right now.
I want to add into that because my question tags right onto that, which is, thinking about Mary, your background. And, think you've been doing this for 25, 30 years, right? And so a lot of times people don't know that piece. And you started out right out of school and you were working with Anna Sui for a bit. And you did work for other places, but you went really soon out of school and started your own business right off the bat. And now you've been running that for 25 years. So to Allison's question there, it's like my question had been, what made you want to start your own business so soon? What is that mindset that, then tags on to Allison's question?
um, yeah, I think I would say there is always an independent and autonomous streak in in me, and also thinking that again, like I would say I was never conscious of this, but I think if I'm going to sit down and answer like it give an answer to it. I'm a quick learner. I like how I'm very curious at how things are done and the how. Basically, I'm always curious about the how and the why. Because I just already had a interest in making clothing and then from that making objects as a kid, whatever way you want to describe it, like, engineering something, putting something together, understanding like how it's done, um, all of those attributes too. Maybe it was maybe it was like osmosis or something from sitting around the table. My dad started his training's in engineering, but he went into being a business executive. So there's always these questions like around the dinner table. I mean, things like if we were at a restaurant and my dad would say something like, "Oh, the weight of this fork is really imbalanced."
Hmm.
And when you're sitting there as like maybe like a 4-year-old, you're like, "What?" You're
You're
like,
talking
I just want my pasta.
the art and design side mixed with
Yeah.
the business executive side is very telling right
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's sinking in right now. I don't know. I would say that I was I still am a little bit because when it's my studio, I do treat a little bit of it as like a playground, an experimental zone, like a lab. Like I'm willing to make the mistake on a small scale in my studio
Mm.
and understand the pitfall and be the advisor for other people to say like, well, definitely don't do that. Because I know firsthand. I can't,
Yeah.
I will say there is something about me where if I don't know it firsthand, I'm not going to be a good, well, how can I give advice on that? And so I think with the way I've set up Sloan Steady Wins the Race was by my own rules. It was definitely not, I would say like, if I really wanted to flip the switch and say, all right, I'm gonna build something enormous and go with an IPO and all of
Mm.
that sort of thing. But I didn't want that for Slow and Steady Wins the Race. This I just had these sort of, again, like cultural anthropological questions I wanted to explore. And some of it is started out as critiquing the consumer culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe it's more relevant, maybe it's even more relevant now because people are revisiting it now. But it was very, starting in 2002, when we launched, it was always talking about something antithetical to disposable fashion.
Yeah.
It always wanted to address something that was indispensable and could it be more affordable? Because I think we always think about indispensable as an heirloom, or is it something that's going to cost like, you know, $20,000? And um, but if it is going to cost $20,000, like why is it worth that? And it's I mean, I have to say I totally understand why Warren Buffett never really wanted to invest in like Amazon or retail was always such a wild card for
Yeah.
Berkshire Hathaway. And
Yeah.
I totally understand because it's really at the whims. There's no science behind it.
Mm.
It's when
Mm.
you think of the retail that we're familiar with, it's people's emotions, uh, people being convinced this is what you want.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And of course, the
Manipulation.
world of advertising, the job is to kind of how to convince people to favor one thing over the other, how to convince you that you really need this if you don't really need this.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I have all these, there's always these questions when I sit down and, research and maybe to bring it back to your original question of is it is it worth making? I have to make sure that these days I have to make sure more and more so that it whatever I'm putting out there into the world is improving the situation somehow.
Mhm.
So is it improving if it's a product, is it improving the end user's life? Like is it generating some sort of value? And it's not going to take up dust. It's not going to collect dust. It's not going to take up unnecessary space. And so I would say, and we talked about this maybe in the prep, I'm not forced into constantly designing. Um, I don't want to have to do that within Sloan Steady Wins the Race, where there's that expectation of, oh, do you have a cruise collection? Do you have a holiday collection? Do you have a pre-fall collection?
Mhm.
And um and I think more and more so I say like, well, it's a living archive. I think everything I've designed should still have legs. And if you want to, uh, have that favorite sweatshirt that you bought in 2005, it's still there. You can definitely access it. And when we feel ready for a new collection that there's something definitive that we can say, I can come up with that. I mean, I still have a list of different categories we haven't covered, but it just it has to feel like it's not going to wind up in a landfill.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
Ah,
yeah. And how have you been able to do this and survive and
Well,
have this
yeah,
discernment?
this like with our last 5 minutes, I actually would love to talk about what you're bringing up, Michelle, which is the mechanics of this. Like you're in a mature space with your business as a, consultant and just voice and contributor to
mhm,
art and design. So how do you figure out which pieces fit together? You're living bicoastally. That's a whole effort. You have limited resources like anybody does in terms of time, money, and even just creative energy.
mhm.
How do you balance those pieces together and like what's working or not working about that for you at this point?
I'm,
I, yeah.
oh, if I can
You can
jump
add on,
in,
Allison.
yeah, just super quick accolades to you, Mary, for building a brand and like really standing for it and trying to create long-lasting product with the excellence that you've talked to us about. So I just wanted to give a compliment, but I will give the stage back to you.
I would say I mean I haven't figured it out yet. I think there are the balance. Okay, this is a funny anecdote. My family name Ping, the translation in the language is balance and peace. So the
Mm,
way it's written,
yeah.
it's a dying out surname, but the translation of it when you talk to people and when you see it written in that certain way, it's balance and peace. And I would say
Nice.
that's the ironic thing right now because trying to really, trying to figure it all out in 24 hours in a day, there is that, what's the sort of what's the like non-negotiables, and I have to start uh cementing those, and that will have to sort of maybe squeeze certain things out or whatnot. And I liken it to right now as if like I've shaken up a tray of marbles and I'm just waiting for everything else to kind of like settle back in. And I will say that like when we finish a big deadline, it's a huge amount of breathing spaces is reclaimed. And that I love. I know certain I would say one like life hack I've always had was making sure I didn't sacrifice the it's sort of like letting your brain go to zero is how I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And that really is even like 2 hours of you know no phone, my sketchbook, sitting at the Getty or like sitting at another spot that I feel um and I have these anchor points where I go to, and I've realized, and at first it was more like, oh, I just because I really like them, very simple. And more, and then I realized I they are of a high caliber, like sitting, the Getty, I think about the Getty a lot. It's not just like pleasing to be there, but it runs like clockwork, and I do my walk. I don't take the tram up. I do my walk up and I
Mm.
think about it and I do sort of fantasize like, oh, if I could have everything run like the Getty. And I think about it and then or even like MoMA, I love MoMA for in New York. And I think about it and I was like, how do I get oil money? I'm like, right. I have to like somehow find an oil well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too, is right. I think a key point goes back to when you stopped working for other brands and you started your own, which is, like, um, how do when you're younger, it's a little easier, I think when we're older, but financially, how do you do that? How do you get started? And so that's a bigger question too, but you kind of answer some of it in there of like
Yeah.
how you think about who can support you, how can you get what you need to do this?
Well, I started Slow and Steady Wins the Race with this rule that I wasn't going to spend more than $200 on the first collection. And I kind of sometimes I like
Wow.
rules like that. It's
Yeah,
like keeps
that's
me
great.
disciplined. Um, and of course, if I want to get really granular, I is it like was it really $200? Because it's like, well, there's my education of learning how to make clothing.
Right.
I had the benefit of like I knew how to pattern make already. I knew how to grade. I knew how to sew. I could construct everything. I constructed everything myself. And certain things like if I had this conversation, I might have had this conversation at one point with my dad. My dad's like, that wasn't $200. He was like, your sewing machine alone is not $200, you know?
Right.
And and so I would say, but I did start it. I did start it with saying like, okay, can I do this for $200? And I did it and I did start it on in the aftermath of 9/11,
Yeah. Yeah.
where I did have this feeling because my signature runway show happened 2 days before. And then all of
Wow.
Fashion Week was cleared out. And I completely had this moment of I need to go down and volunteer. Why are we worrying about, if there's going to be cocktail dresses for sale at Saks Fifth Avenue? And
Wow.
but again, that's my initial emotional reaction. And of course, then I realized like, oh, my being able to produce my brand is other people are relying on it. I have a responsibility to the factory that I gave the orders to, the fabric suppliers. Like that's the whole circle of where the money is flowing.
Yeah.
So Um, so I do think about that. I do
Hmm.
I think for all of our um criticisms, which are valid of fast fashion as a system, I do still think back to, well, you're looking at a whole community of sewers that need these jobs. They need a
Yeah.
brand to come in and say, like, I need you to make 250,000 units of this at, you know, $2. Um, and in given that the way the country is set up, they're kind of forced into that, or I don't know if the word forced is accurate, but um
A sense of responsibility.
so
Mhm.
it is thinking about, like, well, what's the solution there?
Mhm.
And I even see it here too in Los Angeles. We definitely, the factories I work with, uh if once we've delivered our first, our round of production, then maybe we won't have another production round for 4 months, let's say. We get a lot of emails and phone calls like from the factory saying if we have work for them. And I said, like, well, maybe in 2 months, but not right now.
Hmm.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're at time, and we can segue to Q&A. Any last words from on the recorded session from anybody? Then I will say thank you, Mary. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Unexpected.
There's so
And
much more I could ask. Yeah.
yeah, well, now
Absolutely.
we have the unrecorded part, which we'll do. We'll
Yeah.
segue
Yeah.
to and join.
No, Mary, thank you so much. I feel like it was so insightful to dig into your mind, and thank you for being so generous
Yeah.
with your knowledge. Like you're a gem. I am so happy